As we continue to build some materials for our robot, we're going to look at creating custom materials. So we'll go back to the material editor, and we'll start with some of the basic material types in Max. So I'm just going to start by moving back up here, and we're just going to drag in a standard material. Now, the standard material is one of the most basic material types in Max. It gives me quite a bit of flexibility. So if I click on it, I have different types of material basics here. Anisotropic allows me to have kind of non-uniform or non-round highlights. Blinn is basically the new version of Phong. It's a little bit more, I guess, accurate or realistic. Metal, I lose one of my swatches here, so I don't have a specular swatch with the metal material. But by controlling the glossiness and specular level, I can very much control the brightness of that highlight. So it's pretty metally. But these are pretty basic, non-realistic types of shaders. So what we're going to do, we're just going to delete that one. And we're going to start with some of the more advanced materials now. So we're going to work with the Arch and Design material. When I double click here, there are templates that I can start with Arch and Design. So the architectural and design materials give me a good kind of basic starting point for what I may want to work with and I guess make adjustments to. So the glossy plastic material starts this kind of odd tan colored plastic. So we're going to click here on the color swatch and we're going to change this to a much darker gray. And then we're going to look at modifying the amount of reflectivity and glossiness. So first of all, let's just drop this onto an object. Let's use the forearms. So we can see kind of a comparison difference between the pre-built plastic material and the one that we just made. So the one we just made, you can see already, has got a much kind of different diffuse highlight to it, where this one is a bit, I guess, more plasticky looking, although this could be tightened up a little bit to be a little bit shinier plastic. So we're going to go back to our material editor, and as we look at this, we want to probably bring up the glossiness. So we increase the tightness of that highlight, and then we'll bring down the reflectivity. So as we bring that down, we don't want plastic that's quite as reflective of the world around it. So that's getting a little too shiny. And then we'll go down and we'll find under our bump map here, the none, right? So I want to actually apply some bumpiness to this, but I don't necessarily want to use a bitmap all the time. So I'm going to use a noise map in Max, which is basically just mathematically generated randomness. So we click on the noise itself and we can see the size. Generally, and we'll take a look at the default size here. Generally, the default size is going to be really big, and it's actually, I think, so big that I can't even hardly see it. So we're going to go back in here, and we're going to make the size quite a bit smaller. So let's try it at 5 and see what we get. You can see on there's some disturbance in the surface, but it still seems really, really big. So we're going to go back again. We're going to make this quite a bit smaller. Let's try it at 0.2. Now I'm getting a lot more bumpiness, and the size of it actually looks pretty good, but it's pretty deep. So right now it's a little too bumpy. The bump is a little too heavy. So if we go back into the main part of our material here, the bump amount needs to be brought down as well. So we bring that down to 0.1 rather than 0.3. We'll see now when we render, the bump hasn't changed size, but it definitely has changed depth. So it's not as deep anymore. So that looks all right. It's still got kind of a grayish, tannish hue to it. So we're going to work on fixing that. So right now, our color here is still a bit of this bronze saturated color. So we're going to get rid of the saturation there. Now when we look, we've got more of a solid gray. Now as we render color-wise, it's pretty similar with the upper arm, but the bumpiness and basically the highlights are quite a bit different between the two materials. So we're going to go back in, we're going to find that pre-built plastic, and we're going to look at what the bumpiness is using here. So if we click on the smooth bump PNG, we can actually come in here and we can click on it again, and we can see that file. So it'll go to the mats file that it came from, and if we just hit view, we can see what that bump actually looks like. Now, it's a little minimal, I think, so we're actually going to get rid of it. So I'm just going to click on it and I'm going to disconnect that connection and we're just going to click and delete it. Now what I'm going to do from my noise that I made for the other material, I'm just going to drag a connection into the finish bumps. That's going to allow me to use the same noise map for both of these materials. So now when we render, we should have a pretty similar look to the bumps on both materials. So size and scale wise, it actually works for both of them, and it's actually looking pretty good. So I think the highlight can be modified a bit on this one, and in the long run, the better thing to do is just going to be to use the same material on both. But using any of these material types, we can completely customize and modify pretty much anything about the materials that we want to. So take a look at some of those basic material types and then look at ways that you can customize and kind of make them your own.